Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Sarah.
Thanks so much for joining me in my So Tell Me About Your Research series.
Very happy to be here.
Great, great. So my first question for you is, what was your first experience of sewing?
Yeah, so it was fun to kind of think back through that, before got involved with it professionally. But yes, so my mom is a really good seamstress, and when I grew up, she sewed not all of my clothes, but many of them, and so I kind of grew up with her doing that. She taught me some. I'm definitely not as skilled as she is, or having seen this hat as you are.
Oh, thank you.
But learned some of the basics, and so I certainly kind of as a kid kind of realize kind of the skill that goes into sewing.
Very neat. And then you prefaced that you are involved in sewing professionally, not as a sewist, but you're an
Yes,
economist
yes.
who researches these garment factories. So can you describe a bit about how that the sewing is connected to your research?
Yes, yes. So I do a lot of my research, which is broadly kind of thematically focused on women in the labor force in low income countries and often in export industries. And so the garment industry in Bangladesh is a classic example of that. So I've kind of been researching the garment industry for over 15 years now, and so I have looked at it from a bunch of different angles. Some of my early work looked at how the garment sector has affected women's lives and found that, for instance, families were more likely to enroll their daughters in school, and they were delaying marriage and childbearing once they did get older. And so those were kind of really beneficial outcomes for women. But of course, we know that working conditions can be really tough, culminating in the tragedy that people might remember, the Rana Plaza tragedy in 2013. And so after that, I've also been looking at working conditions and how to try to improve working conditions so that the women who work in garment factories can, reap the benefits of these jobs. We do know that they pay more than the alternatives, and the alternatives are just not that many in Bangladesh. But without kind of such risk to their health and safety.
Wow. So can you describe that a little more visually or physically? Like you have your mom's sewing set up probably at your house at a table, and then how does the garment factories contrast to that?
So, I mean, in some ways it's that, but on a much bigger scale. I mean, the sewing machines that they tend to use on the sewing line are not that different than,
Here I am sewing Rachel's hats.
here in the US. Of course, it's much more specialized. So kind of each person's making only a part of the garment. And another difference is that they typically do, different pieces, different kind of parts of the production process under the same roof. So they will have big dyeing machines or looms to weave the cloth, or kind of on the back end, if you buy jeans that are kind of, pre-distressed, like they have kind of machines that will do that. So that's kind of, on the front and back end is a little different than maybe the sewing people would typically do in their house. But, on the sewing line, look pretty similar actually.
That's great. But also it makes me wonder, like, so what is the big danger of working in these factories? What's the working conditions if it does seem very similar to a US home setup in some ways?
When we see workplace injuries, it's either kind of, repetitive, stress injury type things because, obviously the typical worker in the US isn't sewing 10 hours a day, or it's things related to the building and maintenance. So fires, the Rana Plaza was a collapse.
So, your research is on women's empowerment, and does sewing empower women?
It does. Yes, yes. So kind of, so some of my research is focused, like obviously, women throughout the world sew. And so a lot of my research is focused on, what happens when that becomes a job that you do, in particular outside the home. There's including some parts of the garment sector, supply chain in Bangladesh where women sew for money, but in their houses. But that's not the majority of women. It's kind of, leaving your house to go work in to go work in a factory and get a regular paycheck. And so, without saying that, sewing, in your own home for your own family consumption is bad for women. A lot of what my research has done is said, when you do that regularly and get a regular paycheck from somebody else for that, uh, you know, what kind of changes for you? And we do see that, kind of having that job opportunity is really important for women, it's an income source for the family, but it also gives women higher bargaining power and, more say in household decisions. And importantly, if there is a garment factory near you, you don't even necessarily need to be working in it. Just knowing that you have that option,
Hmm.
you could provide for yourself if needed is enough to raise your bargaining power. So that's kind of,
Again, that's bargaining power in the
yeah.
household, not like a labor union bargaining power.
Oh, yes, yes, kind of vis-a-vis other household members. Yes.
Yeah, so you can make more decisions about what you want to buy as opposed to what your spouse wants to buy.
Exactly. Yes, yes.
Interesting.
You might disagree about things like, supporting, do you send your girl children to school as much as your boy children? And, those kind of things that's, kind of if you disagree, kind of having the woman have bargaining power in that situation is really important.
Wow, so then it's like an intergenerational future impact as well if it's about the girl children.
Yes, yes, yes. So we do
Wow.
see kind of some virtuous cycles that then, kind of there's more investment in girls, both because, they have more job opportunities, but because the mothers are more empowered as well, who, are currently working.
Oh, so interesting. And can you compare like what would be the difference between working in like a sewing factory or a garment factory as opposed to perhaps an electronic factory where you're still getting the same type of working paycheck and going leaving the house, etc. But it's a different environment.
So I think that, a lot of my research, as I was saying earlier, does fundamentally say that the key thing is kind of getting a regular steady paycheck, and so that whatever kind of job that would be, that's kind of a key thing for the women. It's not to say that the experience is exactly the same. So garment factories do hire mostly, not entirely, but mostly women, and so it's possible that the rapid employment growth in the garment industry kind of allowed families to feel a little more comfortable with their daughters working because it was predominantly women. So that, is possibly, one difference. And then another thing is just because women were hired at such large and unprecedented scale, it leads to kind of likely more kind of broader societal change,
Mm.
kind of increased acceptance of women working. It's hard to, it's been such a sea change in Bangladesh. It's hard to really kind of, pin down the causality there and say for sure that working in a garment factory changes social norms, but we have evidence in other areas that more women working does liberalize social norms around kind of the acceptability of women working.
Oh, very interesting. So maybe it's like a first step, a catalyst toward working in later in other
Yes,
jobs.
yes, which then again, a different virtuous cycle is that it becomes more acceptable to work, so more people do work, and so that feeds off itself for sure.
Wow. So interesting. So I sewed you a project. I made you a sun hat in my, not a factory, just my house. Took a long time. I don't think anybody could hire me to mass produce this hat. But
Well,
can we
yes, you can tell there's a lot of work in it. So yes,
oh
it's
thanks.
probably it's more kind of on the bespoke scale, but yeah,
Yes.
it's beautiful.
Oh thanks. So can you hold it up and then show the different sides with the research?
Yes,
Yeah, I designed the fabric from your research. So let's
yes,
see if we can
yes.
see here.
This is one side, and it's some figures and then some code,
Yeah, I kind of
and
posed
and
them
then
on
the
each
other
other.
side is some raw data, including kind of Bangla phrases for things like, this is data from garment workers. So Bangla phrases for things like, how do you get to work? And so this is these are the free responses for those.
And I looked at the Bangladesh flag for the colors of that site.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, yeah. The colors are indeed very appropriate. Yes.
Nice, nice, great. Great. And what was your experience wearing the hat out and about?
Yeah, so it was a sunny weekend in Seattle, so I was very glad to have the hat. And yes, my husband knew a little bit about the project. And so he kind of knew it kind of came from research, but he's like, is that literally your results?
Oh,
So,
cool.
so I said, yeah, those are, real regressions from my own research. So
Awesome.
yeah, my kids did not care as much. They kind of went and played at the festival and didn't care what was on my hat. But yeah, my husband appreciated it. Yeah.
Great, great. Did anybody at the festival notice that there were numbers or research or Bangladeshi words on your hat?
They didn't, but I'm going to keep wearing it and see because I bet they will eventually because it's
Okay.
it's a pretty worldly population. So
Oh,
somebody's
great.
gonna be like, is that Bangla? So
Nice.
yeah. So I'll keep you posted on that.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Rachel. This was a super interesting conversation, and I really appreciate your insight on the large-scale sewing in contrast to the small-scale sewing.
It's my pleasure. Yes, thank you so much for the hat and for chatting with me.
Have a wonderful rest of your sunny day there in Seattle.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Bye.
Okay, bye.